A man has finally been arrested as a suspect in a decades-old cold case of a woman who was attacked and whose life was ended while she was sleeping in her car. In September 1989, Beverly Wivel, a 30-year-old mother from Canton Township, Michigan, had just dropped off her young son at school. She was sleeping in her vehicle when she was abducted, indecently assaulted, and fatally shot. The deputies were sent to the area of Ford and Gottfredson roads for reports of a woman who had been shot and was found on the side of the road. Her body was found on the side of the road in Superior Township, only a short drive from Canton. She had been shot with a .45 caliber pistol. Beverly's vehicle was later found abandoned at an area park, still running with the driver's door open and her purse inside. A witness reported hearing a gunshot and seeing a blue vehicle similar to a Chrysler New Yorker with a white top speeding near the crime scene. At the time, an assault kit was conducted and DNA evidence was collected. Despite the investigators' attempts, a match to a known individual was not made and her case went unsolved for nearly 4 decades. In 2022, the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Office reopened the case in hopes that a reinvigorated investigation would help identify the person responsible for Beverly's slaying. Working with the Michigan State Police, the forensic evidence from the crime was submitted to Othram in January 2024. Once at Othram's laboratory, the scientists used forensic-grade genome sequencing to build a comprehensive DNA profile for the suspect. Othram's in-house forensic genetic genealogy team then used this profile to conduct genealogy research, ultimately providing new investigative leads to law enforcement. Those leads led to the possible identity of a suspect. The investigators continued their investigation and collected several items that were sent to the Michigan State Police Lab for DNA comparison. This comparison was a match to the original DNA collected in 1989, identifying 69-year-old Buster Robbins as the suspect in Beverly's case. The investigators conducted several days of surveillance over a period of several weeks on Robbins' home in Almonte, a small town north of Detroit in Michigan, where he lives with his wife. On September 24, 2024, the investigators collected several items, including used plastic straws, which were sent to the Michigan State Police Lab for DNA comparison. The forensic scientists found that DNA from one of the straws matched the DNA from the assault kit. The investigators said that Robbins' wife told them that in 1989, Robbins drove a vehicle that matched the description reported by the witness. They also found a .45 caliber magazine with ammunition in the home while conducting a search warrant. He was then arrested. During a motion hearing on May 15, 2025, the prosecutors said that Robbins should not be given bond as he is under investigation for other cases, and explicit photos of children was found on Robbins' tablet. The prosecutors believe that Robbins is a flight risk. The defense requested Robbins to be out on bond, saying there is little to no evidence leading to Robbins being connected to Beverly's slaying. The only evidence found connecting him to the case is his DNA that was found in Beverly. The defense argued that the DNA sample could not determine if it was consensual or not. The judge decided to give Robbins a $5 million bond. He is required to have a GPS tether and reside with his daughter. Phyllis Megison, Beverly's niece, said, "He has been able to live a life for 35 years. She has not. I am scared he is going to get off." Jacqueline Megison, Beverly's half-sister, said, "I just hope and pray that his daughter that he is going to be staying with has her eyes on her children all of the time. We do not want more babies hurt." On May 20th, an appeal hearing was held to determine if there is enough evidence to move the case back to district court. The judge said, "The district court appears to have erred by only considering direct evidence while not acknowledging the circumstantial evidence, and that it provided a sufficient basis to make a person of ordinary caution and prudence conscientiously obtaining belief of the defendant's guilt. This was an abuse of the district court's discretion. The judge ruled that the case will be remanded to district court." During the hearing on June 10th, a judge bound the matter over to the circuit court on a slaying charge. Robbins' bond will continue, and a not guilty plea was entered. The case is still ongoing. A tip line is available for the Wayne County Sheriff's Office Detective Bureau at 1-734-973-7711 for those who want to help solve this decades-old mystery. After nearly 29 years since the disappearance of an 11-year-old girl, her family and community finally have some answers. On the morning of August 21, 1996, 11-year-old Trudy Leanne Appleby stood in her driveway in Moline, Illinois. Her father had just left for work, thinking his little girl would spend the day safely at home. But Trudy had her own plans. It is said that she had asked to go swimming with a friend at Campbell's Island, but her father said no. She had packed a swimsuit and towel, excited about the swim, even though her father had told her no. The police said that phone records from that day indicated that she may have gone. She left behind over $200 in cash she had been saving, a sign that she expected to be back soon. Neighbors later recalled seeing a gray or silver four-door car, possibly a Chevrolet Celebrity, pull up. A young man with shoulder-length curly hair and a baseball cap was at the wheel. Trudy climbed in. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. Her disappearance stunned the community. An Amber Alert system did not yet exist, but flyers, news coverage, and vigils kept her face in the public eye. The detectives combed the area, scoured leads, and questioned her family. Despite intense efforts, the trail grew cold. For 2 decades, Trudy's family clung to hope. Every year, they held candlelight vigils, refusing to let her memory fade. Then, in 2017, the investigators revealed a breakthrough. They named William Ed Smith, a longtime family acquaintance, as a person of interest. He owned a car matching the witness description and was reportedly seen with Trudy around the time she vanished. The detectives searched his property in nearby Campbell's Island, but no trace of Trudy was ever found. Smith passed away without facing charges. The case did not end there. The authorities turned their attention to others in Smith's circle. By 2020, 2 more names emerged: David Whipple, Smith's son-in-law and a registered offender, and Jamison Fisher, another associate. The investigators believed that both men had knowledge of what happened to Trudy, perhaps even direct involvement. Whipple passed away in 2022, but Fisher remained under scrutiny. Over the years, the investigators seized a boat, thought to contain forensic evidence, searched countless locations, and put up billboards asking witnesses to come forward. The police dug up a backyard in Kelowna in 2023 in connection to Trudy's disappearance. Still, no remains surfaced. Yet, the police insisted the investigation was active, gathering threads of evidence, testimony, and long-buried secrets. Finally, in August 2025, nearly 29 years after Trudy vanished, the case reached a turning point. A grand jury indicted 50-year-old Jamison Fisher on 3 counts of first-degree slaying and 1 count of concealment of a demise. The officials said that due to a statute of limitations, they are not able to charge Fisher with kidnapping in Henry County. The authorities said that they believed Trudy had been indecently assaulted, slain, and dumped somewhere. Fisher has always denied his involvement. He is currently in the custody of the Scott County Sheriff's Office for a probation violation, where he will remain for further court proceedings. Though Trudy's body has never been found, the prosecutors believe they can finally prove what her family has feared all along. Her life was ended the day she disappeared. For her loved ones, the arrest brought both relief and grief. Relief that someone may finally be held accountable. Grief that Trudy never came home. Her case stands as a haunting reminder that even after decades, the truth has a way of rising, carried by persistence, memory, and the determination of a community unwilling to let a child's voice be silenced. A Whitewater man has been arrested in the nearly 6-year-old cold case of a Cathedral City, California man who was found with fatal gunshot wounds. On October 26, 2019, at 12:03 a.m., the deputies were called to a home on the 53,000 block of Avenida Madero in La Quinta, Riverside County, California, for a report of an assault with a fatal weapon. Upon arrival, the deputies located Anthony Carrillo, a 19-year-old male from Cathedral City, suffering from gunshot wounds inside a residence. He was transported to a local hospital where he was pronounced deceased. The central unit arrived to investigate, but the suspect had already fled the scene. Unfortunately, after several years of investigation, the case went cold without any leads for an arrest. However, the investigators from the central unit began a review of this investigation after almost 6 years. Through this review, additional evidence and information were identified, and the investigation was reopened. The investigators identified Jorge Huerta Arias, a 24-year-old male from Whitewater, as the suspect in this case. On June 13, 2025, Huerta Arias was arrested for his involvement in this incident, and he was booked into the Coys Bird Detention Center. He is being held on a $3 million bond. His first court appearance was scheduled at 8 a.m. on June 18, where he was formally charged with slaying along with sentence-enhancing allegations of discharging a firearm, causing great bodily injury, and engaging in criminal street gang activity. He pleaded not guilty to all charges during his arraignment at the Larson Justice Center in Indio. A possible motive for the crime has not been disclosed. This investigation is ongoing and no further information will be released at this time. Anyone with information regarding this investigation is encouraged to call Master Investigator J. Manharis or Master Investigator V. Magana of the Central Unit at 951-955-2777. A woman who took the life of her infant son in 1986 in Connecticut and went on with her life as if nothing happened has remained unknown for more than 3 decades. DNA testing finally linked her to the case. On May 16, 1986, an infant was found deceased in a garbage truck after sanitation workers emptied a dumpster in Greenwich, Connecticut. The baby boy was referred to as Baby John. The medical examiner determined that the baby boy was strangled shortly after being born. Despite investigation, no arrests were made and the case went cold. In 2019, more than 3 decades later, the police announced new DNA techniques would be used to try to solve the case. They offered a $20,000 reward for information leading to an arrest and conviction. The following year, in 2020, the Greenwich police reactivated the case using advanced DNA techniques. Evidence that was found at the crime scene has been linked to 65-year-old Janita Phillips. The investigators collected genetic material from Phillips' home trash at her Lake Mary, Florida residence. Testing identified her and her husband as the infant's parents. Phillips lived at the apartment building where the infant was found in the dumpster. She and her family moved to Florida shortly after the baby's life was ended. In late 2021, Phillips turned herself in to the Greenwich authorities. She was arrested and charged with slaying. Initially, she denied involvement, but later confessed during a videotaped interview. When Phillips ended the boy's life, she and her husband had just moved into an apartment in Greenwich with their eldest child after being homeless. Her husband had told her he did not want another baby. The couple, who remained together and have been married for 42 years, were stressed about money and their ability to feed their family. Phillips told the police that she hid the pregnancy from her husband and other relatives. The police said that her husband did not know about the baby's end and had no involvement. Phillips and her husband have 3 children who are now adults. One of their sons is disabled and resides at an assisted living facility, while her husband has medical problems and she takes care of him. In October 2024, her attorney, Stephen DeLeo, proposed using an extreme emotional disturbance defense, citing psychological duress at the time of the incident. The claim was grounded in Connecticut law, which permits reduced charges under such circumstances. In February 2025, a plea deal was offered and deliberated, with the defense requesting that the court consider her mental state at the time of the crime. The disposition hearing was initially delayed to allow the judge time to review psychological evaluations and other submissions. On April 24, she pleaded guilty in Superior Court to first-degree manslaughter. In July, as part of the plea arrangement, the original 20-year sentence was fully suspended. She received 5 years of probation. DeLeo said, incarcerating her would serve no purpose at this time, adding that this case was Phillips' only brush with the law in her life. He also said that she lost her insurance industry job because of the case. 65-year-old Phillips expressed deep remorse in court and took full responsibility for her actions. It was highlighted that if Phillips violates her probation, she could face up to 20 years in prison. For decades after 2 teenagers were attacked in their parked car in Northern California, the person responsible has finally been arrested and charged. On December 14, 1984, at around 10 to 11:25 p.m., Two teenagers were parked on Mountain View Road near Bernie High School in Shasta County, California, when they were approached by another vehicle. 18-year-old Terrence Arndt, also known as Terry, and his date were then shot at with a .22 caliber rifle. Terry shielded his date from the bullets, and he was injured in the process. The assailant then indecently assaulted the young woman, and he then left the two teenagers to blow out their last breath. The female victim managed to drive to safety and summon help. Terry was then transported to an area hospital, but unfortunately succumbed to his injuries. He was a star athlete at Bernie High School before enrolling at Shasta College in Redding, California. An extensive investigation followed with thousands of hours of casework. The detectives collected forensic evidence from the female victim's clothes. The case unfortunately quickly went cold. A significant lead emerged in 1995, more than a decade later, resulting in the arrest of Thomas Elmer Brewster, a Fall River Valley resident. However, DNA analysis of male DNA found on the victim's blouse did not match Brewster, leading to dismissal of charges. He was formally exonerated and released after nearly 2 years in custody. The DNA profile was entered into the combined DNA index system, but there were no matches to any known individuals. The case then went cold again for almost 3 decades. In 2024, the Shasta County Sheriff's Office revisited the case using forensic genetic genealogy. That led the police to a suspect, identified as Roger Neil Schmidt Sr. 64-year-old Schmidt would have been 23 at the time of the crime. He also strongly resembled a sketch developed based on an account from the female victim. The police determined that Schmidt was currently living in Tucson, Arizona, but had lived in Bernie, California in 1984. On July 16, 2025, the detectives from the Shasta County Sheriff's Office traveled to the city to coordinate with the Tucson Police Department and obtain a search warrant. The police were able to collect a DNA sample from Schmidt and confirm that it matched the profile. The DNA was a match. A warrant was issued on July 18. Schmidt was arrested the following day and was booked into the Pima County Jail on slaying and indecent assault charges. He made his first court appearance on July 21. He was in a wheelchair and using an oxygen tank. Schmidt is expected to be extradited to Shasta County. He pleaded not guilty to the charges. Sheriff Michael L. Johnson said that he hopes the arrest brings closure to the female victim and Terry's family. Johnson said, "The resolution to this case is a bit bittersweet for us. Although it is a monumental accomplishment for the investigators, for the agency, and the closure of having a suspect in custody, it does not negate the fact that there is a family and families that have been forever impacted and will forever live with the trauma and the aftermath that was left behind for them." His next scheduled court date is August 28, to set the date for his preliminary hearing. For now, Schmidt is being held with no bail. Nearly 5 decades after a 20-year-old woman's life was ended, her case has finally been closed. In December 1978, 20-year-old Diana Kuhn's life was tragically ended in West Lynn, Oregon. The case remained unsolved for 46 years. In a 2025 cold case review, law enforcement uncovered a critical piece of evidence that had never been tested for DNA. When submitted to the Oregon State Police Crime Lab, the DNA matched a person of interest, David Lawrence Atchison. Atchison has previously been identified as a suspect but had never been confirmed due to lack of testing. He passed away in 1989. The investigators strongly believe that if he was still alive, he would have been indicted, tried, and convicted for aggravated slaying and indecent assault. This case exemplifies how advances in forensic science can bring long-awaited resolution to cases once thought unsolvable. Though Atkinson can no longer face legal consequences, this resolution undoubtedly offers a degree of closure to Diana's family and the wider community. An elderly couple from Chatsworth, Georgia has been arrested in connection with a cold case that happened more than 2 decades ago, where the body of a man was found inside his truck at a Wendy's parking lot in Adairsville, Georgia. On March 10, 2001, at around 7:04 p.m., the authorities responded to a call about a suspicious vehicle at the Wendy's parking lot in Adairsville, Georgia. When they arrived at the scene, they found 51-year-old Travis Silver's body wrapped in a comforter, and it was lying on the passenger side of his 1978 Ford pickup. It appeared that he had been shot in the head and was left there intentionally to be found. No weapon was found inside the truck. Lieutenant Larry Meelan of the Adairsville Police Department stated that there was no gunpowder residue or bullet damage to the cab. This suggested that Travis was not shot at close range inside the truck. An autopsy was conducted by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation Crime Lab in Atlanta. Additional investigation details were not publicly released at the time to avoid compromising the case. The case went cold but remained under investigation for 24 years. In April 2025, a stunning development was made in the case. The GBI arrested two suspects, 74-year-old Gary Fowler and 73-year-old Mary Fowler of Chatsworth, Georgia. They were arrested on April 11th, approximately 34 miles from Adairsville. Both were charged with the end of Travis Silver's. Information regarding how the authorities connected the Fowlers to the case or whether they knew Travis has not yet been released. No bond had been set for the couple, and online records do not currently display an attorney representing either of the Fowlers. The investigation remains active and ongoing. A man busy fishing spotted a car in the Mississippi River by chance. Little did he know the car was tied to a 1960s cold case. In August 2025, a 1963 metallic blue Buick Electra was recovered from the Mississippi River near Sartell, Minnesota, by the Stearns-Benton County Sheriff's dive team. Human remains were found inside the vehicle. Brody Locke, a fisherman from Watkins, Minnesota, was using a Garmin LiveScope sonar while fishing over the weekend with a friend when he spotted a car. Brody said, "When he caught the fish, I turned the transducer around and boom, there it was just sitting on the bottom. It was 100% luck. If my buddy would not have caught that walleye, then we would have just kept on floating down and never would have found it." The investigators spent hours removing the car. The car's vehicle identification number matched the vehicle registered to Roy George Ben, a 59-year-old man from Sauk Rapids who vanished on September 25, 1967, after leaving the King's Supper Club while reportedly carrying a large sum of money. Roy was a businessman and owner of the St. Cloud Appliance Repair Service. His wife had passed away the year before. His disappearance was out of character, and his family believed that he would not have abandoned them. He was declared legally deceased in 1975. The remains have been sent to the Midwest Medical Examiner's Office for identification and to determine the cause of demise. The Benton County Sheriff's Office, in collaboration with other agencies, is leading the investigation. DNA from relatives had already been collected in hopes of solving the case. With new physical evidence in hand, investigative review investigators will re-examine all case files and clues. It took nearly 58 years after his disappearance, but Roy's case appears to finally be on the verge of resolution. For Roy's surviving family, this discovery could bring both closure and a renewed emotional chapter. A loyalty card from a local supermarket has helped the Ocoee police in Florida solve a cold case that remained unsolved for over a decade. In 2016, construction workers and a passing motorist came across skeletal remains in a patch of overgrowth off the Florida Turnpike near Ocoee, west of Orlando, Florida. With the bones lay a set of keys attached to two worn store loyalty cards. The find was logged as an unidentified John Doe case. The investigators could not immediately match the remains to any missing person. The DNA was badly degraded, and there was nothing conclusive to go on. The bones were carefully stored. The case remained open, but with little movement. 9 years later, in 2025, the Ocoee police, working with forensic specialists, revisited the evidence. Retired Detective Michelle Grogan re-examined the keys. Those cheap plastic tags that had been overlooked for years turned out to be the key, literally. The re-examining of the evidence determined that the remains belonged to a Jamaican man, specifically to the St. Mary region. Detective Michelle Grogan was given 3 potential relatives. A break in the case that came from an unexpected clue, a Winn-Dixie loyalty card. Investigators traced the loyalty card numbers back to an account and a name, Lloyd P. Williams, missing since 2013. Detective Grogan was able to contact the man's son, who provided a DNA sample to confirm his identity. DNA and dental comparisons confirmed it. After 12 years, the John Doe had a name. In August 2025, the police announced to the public that the remains were those of Lloyd. On March 14, 2013, in a quiet Orlando neighborhood, the normal rhythms of life slipped into something darker. Neighbors on Blue Tick Drive noticed the back door of 89-year-old Lloyd's home was standing open. Lloyd, a retired man who valued his independence, was not outside tending to his yard or chatting on the porch as usual. When his family members went to check, they found his house ransacked, belongings out of place, and Lloyd nowhere to be found. A missing person report was filed. His son flew in from out of town, urging the police to search harder. At first, there were whispers of a robbery gone wrong, maybe even foul play. But there were no witnesses, no surveillance footage, and no clear sign of how he vanished. For weeks, the volunteers searched the area, but they got no leads and the case grew cold. His son described the emotional toll of not knowing his father's fate. He said, "At night you keep thinking, where is he? It is a mystery, no trace." For his family, there was relief in finally knowing, but no closure in the bigger questions. How did he end up miles away from home? Was his disappearance linked to a burglary or something more sinister? Was his demise natural, or did someone silence him? The cause and manner of demise remain undetermined. The medical examiner has officially labeled his demise as suspicious. Justice remains uncertain, but for his loved ones, at least the long years of not knowing where he was has ended. Tony Bledsoe. In March 1992, a 24-year-old man left his Arcadia, Indiana home and never returned. For over 2 decades, his disappearance remained a mystery. On April 3, 1992, the authorities in Putnam County, Indiana, made a grim discovery. Dismembered human remains were found dumped in a ravine. The body was missing its head, hands, and feet, leaving the investigators with no immediate way to determine the victim's identity. The condition of the remains added to the challenge. Without key identifying features, confirming who the victim was became a difficult, time-consuming process. With no clear evidence linking the remains to any active missing persons case, the investigation stalled. The case quietly went cold. In 2018, more than 2 decades after the gruesome discovery in Putnam County, DNA testing finally brought long-awaited answers. The remains found in the ravine were confirmed to belong to Tony J. Bledsoe. Tony was born on August 29, 1967. At the age of 24, he was already a devoted husband and a proud father. He lived in the small town of Arcadia, Indiana, with his wife and child. He had previously worked at the Dana Corporation in Indianapolis, a job that had once offered financial stability and structure. Unfortunately, Tony was laid off, a setback that came with emotional and financial strain. Yet, he never allowed that hardship to affect his role as a father and husband. He continued to show strength and resilience, refusing to let his circumstances break his spirit. On March 16, 1992, Tony left his home behind the wheel of his gray 1971 Oldsmobile Cutlass. He had only $8 in cash and 1/8 of a tank of gas. It was a modest amount, but enough to get him through whatever errand or task he had planned for the day. But Tony never returned home. As the hours passed and Tony failed to make contact, his wife's concern quickly grew into alarm. She knew it was not like him to disappear without a word. With no answers and growing fear, she contacted the local authorities to report him missing. An investigation was launched in hopes of uncovering his whereabouts and understanding what might have happened. The investigators began retracing Tony's last known movements, trying to piece together a timeline from what little information was available. They searched for any witnesses who may have seen his car or interacted with him that day. Every lead, no matter how small, was followed. But nothing brought them closer to finding Tony. The trail was cold from the beginning, offering no clear direction. The identification in 2018 reopened the case, giving both the investigators and Tony's family a renewed sense of purpose in seeking justice for the horrific crime that had taken his life. With this breakthrough, law enforcement agencies began re-examining every piece of evidence from the original case. They returned to old reports, re-interviewed individuals connected to Tony, and pursued any new leads that emerged. The investigators were determined to uncover the truth behind his demise, no matter how much time had passed. Their persistence led them down new investigative paths that had previously gone unexplored. The police efforts intensified after a critical tip was received on March 14th, just 2 days before the official identification of Tony's remains. The tip provided a disturbing new lead that shifted the focus of the investigation. The information came nearly 26 years after Tony vanished, and it would become a turning point in the case. The investigators were told that a man named Thomas Anderson had once spoken about Tony's case under chilling circumstances. According to the tipster, Thomas allegedly claimed to have witnessed another individual commit the crime. The story he shared was graphic and specific, mentioning not only the slaying, but also the dismemberment of Tony's body. The manner of dismemberment matched the condition of the remains found in 1992. His head, hands, and feet removed. The tip included further horrifying details. Thomas allegedly described how the missing body parts had been placed in a bucket filled with concrete. The information aligned with aspects of the original crime scene that had never been publicly released. Since that point, law enforcement has continued to actively pursue the case, conducting interviews, executing search warrants, and building on the foundation laid by the 2018 tip. The renewed investigation gave the case new life and provided Tony's family with hope that the person or people responsible for his demise would finally be held accountable. On May 20, 2025, after years of quiet investigation and newly uncovered evidence, Indiana State Police, along with Hamilton County officials, arrested 53-year-old Thomas "Tommy" Anderson Jr. of Arcadia. He was formally charged with ending the life of Tony. During the course of the investigation, Anderson allegedly confessed to his role in Tony's demise, providing disturbing details that aligned with previously undisclosed evidence from the original crime scene. According to the investigators, Anderson spoke with police on 3 separate occasions. In each interview, he admitted to being involved in the events leading to Tony's end. He told the authorities that the motive behind the crime was tied to a car theft operation he and another man were involved in during the early 1990s. Anderson claimed that Tony had threatened to go to the police after realizing he had been sold a stolen car radio, putting their illegal activities at risk. Anderson recounted that on March 19, 1992, just days after Tony disappeared, he accompanied Tony to the home of another man involved in the racket, located in Noblesville. According to Anderson, it was inside that home that the situation turned fatal. He told the investigators that the second man shot Tony in the head with a shotgun before stabbing him multiple times with a knife. What began as a confrontation quickly escalated into a brutal crime. Anderson also admitted that he did not remain a bystander. He confessed to striking Tony with a baseball bat during the attack, further implicating himself. His account added new layers to the case and helped the investigators reconstruct the events that led to Tony's demise. Each detail Anderson shared strengthened the case against him and began to paint a clearer picture of the violence that had occurred behind closed doors. In his confession, Anderson provided a specific description of the knife used in the stabbing. He recalled its appearance and gave enough detail for the investigators to follow up on his claim. Acting on this information, the police conducted a search of the second suspect's home. The home belonged to a man named Andy Emmert, who had long remained in the shadows of the investigation. During the search, the authorities discovered a knife hidden inside a safe within Emmert's home. The weapon matched the description Anderson had provided nearly exactly, further corroborating his account. 2 Oldsmobile Cutlasses, the same vehicle Tony was last seen driving, was towed from Emmert's property. This physical evidence served as a critical link between Anderson's confession and the slaying itself, offering the investigators the confirmation they needed to continue building their case against both suspects. Anderson stated that after they ended Tony's life, he and the other man dismembered Tony's body, placing his head, hands, and feet into a pickle bucket filled with concrete. The intention, according to Anderson, was to make identification impossible and dispose of the evidence without a trace. His account was deeply disturbing, but it aligned with forensic findings made years earlier. He went on to say that the second man had been driving them toward a town with green in its name before they selected a dumping site for the remains. The investigators took note of the fact that Tony's dismembered body had been discovered approximately 10 miles from Greencastle, Indiana, matching Anderson's vague geographic reference. The proximity supported the credibility of Anderson's statement and further tied him to the disposal of Tony's remains. Anderson described how the body had been bound with nylon rope and spray painted black in an effort to conceal it. These specific details were especially significant to investigators because they had never been released to the public. Only someone directly involved in the crime would have known about the rope and the use of spray paint on the body. The state police later confirmed that these facts had been intentionally withheld during the initial investigation. The secrecy had served as a way to test the credibility of any future confessions or leads. Even with Anderson naming the second man, Andy Emmert, as the one who allegedly pulled the trigger and stabbed Tony, no charges have been filed against Emmert at this time. The reasons behind this decision remain undisclosed, possibly due to ongoing investigation or insufficient evidence. Justin Robinson, Tony's son, said, "My dad did not leave. My dad did not just leave. 33 years after his father vanished off the face of the earth, Justin is finally getting answers, and perhaps even justice." In February 1986, a 17-year-old girl never arrived home in Forest, Mississippi. For nearly 4 decades, her case remained cold until new tips led the authorities to a suspect. Chandra May was born in 1968, the beloved daughter of Janelle and Richard May. The May family lived in the Pea Ridge community, located just south of Walnut Grove, Mississippi. At 17, Chandra was a senior at Leake Academy, a private school situated near Forest, Mississippi. Her academic achievements were recognized through her membership in the National Honor Society. Beyond her academics, Chandra immersed herself in extracurricular activities. She was actively involved in the school newspaper and participated in the student Christian organization. To support herself and gain a sense of independence, Chandra took on a part-time job at the McDonald's located on Highway 35 in Forest. On the evening of February 4, 1986, Chandra was working her usual shift at the McDonald's. Business was unusually slow that night, so her manager allowed her to clock out early. At around 7:40 p.m., she called her mother to let her know that she was heading home. On her way, Chandra made a brief stop at a variety store to pick up a Valentine's Day card for her boyfriend. When Chandra failed to arrive home, her mother's concern quickly turned into alarm. Hours passed with no word, prompting Janelle to contact the local authorities and report her daughter missing. It did not take long for law enforcement to respond. Not far from the May residence, Chandra's car was discovered abandoned on a gravel road near their driveway. The scene was unsettling. Her keys were still in the ignition. The radio was playing. Her purse and other personal belongings were untouched inside, and the driver's side window was partially rolled down. The only item missing was her driver's license. The discovery sent an immediate and chilling signal to her family and investigators. Something was terribly wrong. A large-scale search effort began that very night. Multiple law enforcement agencies, along with members of the local community, united to scour the surrounding areas. Despite the urgency and dedication of the search teams, no immediate breakthroughs emerged. However, a few witnesses came forward with troubling reports. They described seeing a suspicious vehicle in the area, one that appeared to be impersonating law enforcement, flashing blue lights around the time of Chandra's disappearance. This detail introduced a disturbing layer to the case and suggested the possibility of a calculated abduction. 3 agonizing weeks later, on what would have been Chandra's 18th birthday, the search came to a devastating end. Her body was discovered in a creek near Bolton, roughly 40 miles from where she had last been seen. She was found naked, bound, and gagged. The condition of her remains told a horrific story. Medical examiners concluded that Chandra had been assaulted and tortured. The likely cause of demise was strangulation. Even more haunting was the forensic evidence suggesting that she had been kept alive for as long as 17 days before her life was ended. Further chilling testimony came from a witness who stepped forward during the investigation. The individual claimed to have seen Chandra alive 12 days after her initial disappearance, a revelation that aligned with forensic findings. This statement intensified the investigation as the authorities raced to uncover where she had been held and who could have carried out such cruelty. Every lead was pursued, every possible connection examined, as the case gained urgency and drew widespread attention. Despite the early momentum and intense investigative efforts, the trail eventually grew cold. Tips dwindled and leads failed to materialize into concrete answers. In 2021, 35 years after Chandra's tragic demise, a cold case task force was formed to breathe new life into the long-dormant investigation. Composed of experienced investigators and forensic experts, the team began by re-examining all existing evidence with fresh eyes. They meticulously re-interviewed past witnesses and began collecting new tips from the public. Advances in technology and renewed interest in the case began to shift momentum in a way that had not been possible before. By 2024, the task force received a credible and potentially case-breaking lead. The tip pointed to a man named Reuben Weeks, who had previously served a life sentence in Missouri for crimes that bore unsettling similarities to Chandra's case, specifically kidnapping and assault involving impersonation of law enforcement. The investigators began to focus their attention on Weeks, carefully building a case that would withstand scrutiny. On April 29, 2025, that work culminated in the arrest of 63-year-old Reuben Weeks. He was located living in an RV park in Madison County, Mississippi. Weeks was formally charged with kidnapping, assault, slaying, and impersonating a police officer, charges that mirrored the nightmare Chandra had endured. Following his arrest, a bond hearing was held. On May 5th, a judge denied him bond. Weeks remained in custody as preparations for trial began. Key to this breakthrough were witness testimonies, possibly from as many as 3 individuals who provided information that helped corroborate evidence and tie Weeks to the crime. For Chandra's brother and the rest of her family, the arrest represented more than a legal victory. It brought long-awaited hope. Janelle, who was already frail from protracted kidney disease at the time of Chandra's demise, passed away in 1994 at age 50. Her father, Richard, the burly but pleasant riverboat captain who plied his trade for a half-century on the wide Mississippi River, would join his wife there in 2023 at 81. Only Chandra's brother, Tim May, his children and grandchildren remained to witness the reckoning in his sister's brutal case. Tim said, "Closure. My mother passed away not knowing what happened. My father passed away not knowing what happened. I am it. In the 39 years since Chandra was slain, she missed so much. Her father walking her down the aisle, her mother bouncing her grandchild, and 1,000 other joys of life foregone. She has not even had the dignity of a proper inscription on her tombstone." Chandra's heart-shaped headstone is inscribed with a date of birth of February 26, 1968. The date of demise was conspicuously incomplete, February 1986. The blank space for the actual date was left there intentionally. Her unsolved case made it impossible for her loved ones to know on which of the 22 days of her kidnapping that she lost her life. With Weeks in custody, the May family could begin to consider what it meant to complete the story engraved on Chandra's grave marker. A final date to honor her memory and mark the closure of a painful, unresolved chapter. John Ford. On May 3, 1337, the crowded streets of medieval London bore witness to a brutal execution. Behind this savage crime lay years of scandal. Centuries later, digital archives and forensic research unearthed the layers of betrayal, power, and vengeance that led to one of England's most theatrical slayings, where the pulpit met the dagger and love turned to bloodshed. Isla Fitzpaine was born into the powerful Fitzpaine family of Stow, Jersey, Somerset, likely in the early 1300s. As a noblewoman, her life was shaped by privilege and duty. Her marriage to Sir Robert Fitzpaine, a baron and parliamentarian under King Edward III, solidified not only social alliances, but the family's political reach. John Ford, a priest of rural Dorset origins, rose through the ranks to become rector of Aucheford Fitzpaine, a parish within Fitzpaine territory. His duties included spiritual guidance, land management, and close interaction with his noble patrons. Though bound by vows of celibacy, there is no record of him fathering children, suggesting he upheld, or at least appeared to uphold, the expectations of clerical life. His position gave him both access and influence, tools that would bring him dangerously close to Ella. By 1321, the relationship between Ella and John had crossed into criminal territory. According to Royal Commission records, Ella, her husband, Sir Robert, and John jointly led a violent raid on a Benedictine priory near Stoke Kersey. This was not an act of desperation or spontaneous theft. It was an orchestrated assault. They destroyed property and seized 18 oxen, 30 pigs, and over 200 sheep and lambs, which were held for ransom. The priory's affiliation with a French abbey added a political dimension to the crime, exploiting rising anti-French sentiment during the tensions that would soon erupt into the 100 Years' War. What made their actions even more striking was the way they crossed boundaries of class and duty. Isla, a noblewoman, and John, a man of the cloth, collaborated as equals in a criminal enterprise. In the aftermath, the church sought justice, but it was not equally delivered. John allegedly confessed to Archbishop Simon Metham, a move that may have shifted blame away from himself and directly onto Ella. He escaped serious punishment while she became the primary target of religious wrath. The connection between Ella and John eventually erupted into scandal. In 1332, Archbishop Simon Metham condemned Ella for adultery, not just vague misconduct, but specific liaisons with multiple men, including married knights and even clerics. Among them, John was named directly. For a noblewoman and a man of the church, it was not only forbidden but dangerous. Together, they risked exposure in a world where betrayal of sacred vows could bring disgrace, punishment, or worse. In January 1332, Archbishop Metham issued a harsh sentence against Ella. Her punishment was designed to humiliate and break her. She was to walk barefoot across Salisbury Cathedral carrying a large candle each year for 7 years. She lost the right to wear jewelry, was ordered to pay fines and make charitable donations, and faced excommunication if she failed to comply. The church's penalties were both physical and symbolic, a public erasure of her nobility and a forced submission to ecclesiastical power. But Ella did not submit. She refused or evaded the church's demands and disappeared from public life. By April of that year, she was reported hiding in Rotherhithe. Her flight only confirmed the church's worst suspicions, prompting formal excommunication. On the evening of May 3, 1337, after attending Vespers, John walked through the busy Westcheap marketplace in London. He was accompanied by fellow priest Hasculf Neville as they made their way towards St. Paul's Cathedral. What seemed like a casual walk turned fatal. Neville reportedly kept John engaged in conversation, unknowingly or perhaps intentionally setting the stage for a fatal ambush. As they approached the cathedral, 4 attackers emerged from the crowd. Leading them was Hugh Lovell, Ella's own brother, who slashed John's throat with a 12-inch dagger. 2 servants, Hugh Colne and John Strong, simultaneously drove blades into John's abdomen. The assault was swift, brutal, and undeniably premeditated. John collapsed near St. Paul's, bleeding out in the midst of a bustling public square just before dusk. His demise, witnessed by stunned onlookers, sent shockwaves through London. The coroner's rolls, written in Latin, reveal that 33 jurors were summoned for the inquest, an unusually large number even by medieval standards. Many were guild members, underscoring the civic urgency and high-profile nature of the slaying. The jurors quickly identified the assailants and confirmed their ties to Isla Fitzpaine, but by then the perpetrators had vanished, raising immediate suspicions that aristocratic interference had helped them escape justice. Despite overwhelming evidence, only one of the attackers, servant Hugh Colne, was ever brought to justice. In 1342, 5 years after the assassination, Colne was convicted and imprisoned in Newgate. The other 3, including Lovell and Strong, vanished without consequence. Ella herself remained untouched by the legal fallout. She continued living freely and unindicted, retaining her status as Lady Fitzpaine. Her husband, Sir Robert, lived until 1354, and upon his demise Ella inherited the estate. But why was John's life ended? The case went cold until almost 7 centuries later. In June 2025, Professor Manuel Eisner of the University of Cambridge published a groundbreaking forensic analysis of the case in Criminal Law Forum, with support from the Medieval Maps Project. His team digitally reconstructed 14th-century London and confirmed Westcheap as the crime site of John's crime, then one of the city's most violent zones. Historians from Oxford and Cambridge praised the work for shedding new light on medieval crime and power. The cold case is finally solved after 688 years. The researchers concluded that the crime had been carried out at the request of Ela Fitzpaine, an English noblewoman with a thirst for revenge. Dr. Hannah Skoda noted that the case revealed the entanglement of clergy in secular affairs and the active role women played in managing both relationships and revenge. Through digital archives, podcasts, and public access, John's case has resurfaced not just as a historical episode, but as a vivid, cautionary tale of love, betrayal, and retribution. Story 3. Between 2002 and 2004, 3 women had been abducted in Cleveland, Ohio, by a man they thought they knew. He abused and tortured them and used them for his own pleasures. Michelle Knight had known unimaginable hardship her whole life. She had survived indecent abuse by a male relative, life on the streets, hunger, and many more traumas. At the age of 18, Michelle got pregnant and gave birth to her son, Joey. She wanted to be the best mom for him, but it was difficult because she did not have a lot of money. In the spring of 2002, her mother's boyfriend got drunk and fractured Joey's knee. Social services eventually came and put Joey in foster care. Michelle was desperate to get her son back, and on August 23rd, she was on her way to a custody hearing when she got lost. She stopped at a store to ask for directions as she was running out of time to get to the meeting. Then a man offered to help her. She recognized him as the father of one of her friends. He said, "I know where it is at. I can take you straight to it. It will only take me 5 minutes." And Michelle agreed, as it was enough time for her to get there. The man she trusted to help her was Ariel Castro. But instead of going to family court, he took her to his home on the pretense of first picking up his daughter and showing Michelle some puppies. But his daughter did not live with him, and there were no puppies. That was the last time 21-year-old Michelle was seen. Michelle's life was difficult even before her kidnapping. Michelle was not officially registered as missing at the Ohio Police Missing Persons website because her family believed that she had probably left on her own, as she was angry that her son was removed from her custody. Her disappearance did not attract much attention in the local media because she was an adult. Castro ended up holding her captive in his house. The day he took her captive, he told her, "You are not going to leave for a long time." And then he started undressing himself. Michelle dropped to the floor, begging him to let her go. Begging him, saying, "I need to get to my son. This cannot happen." Castro ripped up her son's picture right in front of her and said, "You will never see him." At first, Michelle was kept bound with an extension cord wrapped around her legs, arms, and neck. He shoved a sock in her mouth to muffle her screams. Castro indecently assaulted her multiple times a day. He used loud music to further mute her cries. She said, "It was difficult. I had to go blank. Anytime he was doing anything to me, I had to put myself in a different place." During Michelle's captivity, she had been impregnated by Castro 5 times, but he did not allow her to have one of the babies. He would beat her so badly that she miscarried each time. He would beat her with dumbbells, punch her, and slam her against walls. He also starved her. At one point during her captivity, Michelle had a pet dog, but Castro snapped its neck after it bit him while he was trying to protect Michelle from Castro. During her captivity, there were long stretches where she was chained to a pole and left alone in the dark basement. Almost a year later, Castro kidnapped his next victim. On April 21, 2003, just a day before her 17th birthday, Amanda Berry got up and got ready for work. She was thinking of not going into work that day because of her birthday the next day, but she decided to go. While she was walking home from her job at Burger King, a vehicle started to follow her down the street, and the man inside asked her if she needed a ride home. Amanda knew the man as Ariel Castro. He was the father of a friend and classmate from middle school, and he was an elementary school bus driver. He asked if she wanted to see her friend that he said was at his house. to which Amanda agreed. Castro lied. His daughter was living in another neighborhood with her mother, Castro's ex. After they entered the white two-story house on Seymour Avenue, Castro told Amanda that his daughter might be busy taking a bath. Castro said, "We will just wait," and he started showing Amanda around the house. Castro took her upstairs and showed her something strange. A mystery woman was sleeping in a bedroom in front of a television set. She later learned that the woman was Michelle Knight. Castro took Amanda to the next bedroom. She remembers the room was just really dark and he did not turn on the lights, and there was a little room off of the bigger bedroom, kind of like a big closet. He took her inside the smaller room and instructed her to pull down her pants. That's when she knew this was not going to be good. She became Castro's second prisoner. Amanda said, "He took me to the basement and he taped my wrists and he taped my ankles and he put on a belt around my ankles over the tape. He put a helmet over my head and he said, 'Just be quiet and do not make any noise and I will take you home.'" Amanda said Castro chained her to a pole, shut off the lights and left her in the dark with a television on. She said, "I just started screaming and crying. Somebody please help me, And nobody came. I was so scared that I was going to lose my life. I did not think that I was going to ever make it home." As her abduction made headlines, Amanda watched her mother and sister on the TV in the basement. She said that gave her hope and kept her going. She remembers thinking, "You know what? I am going to make it home to you. As long as you fight, I am going to fight." On the fourth day of her abduction, Castro moved her to an upstairs bedroom and chained her to a radiator with a chain around her stomach. After being missing for 1 week, Castro made a late-night phone call using Amanda's phone to her family and taunted them. He said, "I have Mandy, a nickname only the people that knew her called her. She wants to be with me." In 2003, the FBI was just starting to develop technology that could track a cell phone's location if it was turned on. With that information, they were able to narrow down that her phone had been used within a 30 to 40 block area. FBI agent Tim Kalanick said, "We spent about a week around the clock in that area hoping that this phone would be used again." But Castro never used Amanda's phone again. Meanwhile, Amanda's dark and filthy room at Castro's house was about the size of a closet. She recalls the mattress was old and nasty, and it was just disgusting. And we had the bucket to use the bathroom, and that smelled horrible. Castro gave Amanda a bag of chips or crackers for food to eat, but everything he gave her came at a price, including her weekly shower. She had to take a shower with him. Amanda said she had to numb herself to cope with the indecent abuse. She said, "You put your mind somewhere else so that you are not there. You are not in that room with him." In her diary, which was old notebooks, napkins, or takeaway bags, she used a code, a number at the top of the page to keep record of how many times he indecently assaulted her each day, hoping one day he would be caught and that the police would know what he did to her and that he will be punished. Amanda said, "There was plenty of times when I just never knew why is he keeping me here? I did not know if one day we were going to be slain or he wanted more girls in the house. What was he going to do to us?" Almost a year after Amanda became his prisoner, Castro went on the prowl again, just 5 blocks away from the street where he kidnapped her. 14-year-old Gina de Jesus was close friends with Castro's daughter, Arlene. Castro was also friends with Gina's dad. On April 2, 2004, the day she was kidnapped, Gina and Arlene were heading home from school. The girls called Arlene's mother to ask if they could have a sleepover at Gina's house, but she said no, and the girls went their separate ways. As Gina was continuing her way home, a maroon vehicle pulled up on the curb with Arlene's father at the wheel. He asked her if she had seen his daughter, to which Gina said yes. Arlene was right around the corner. Castro asked her if she could help him find her, to which Gina agreed. But instead of helping him look for his daughter, Castro drove Gina to his house, where he asked her for help moving a stereo. Once Gina was inside, she was unnerved by his bizarre behavior. Gina said he started fixing his eyebrows and trimming his mustache and cutting his nose hairs. Then he started to touch her and stuff. Gina asked him, "What are you doing? You could go to jail," to which he responded, "Well, okay, you are going to go home now, but you cannot go through the same door you came in." Castro led Gina to his basement, where she said he grabbed her and chained her up. Gina said, "He did not make it tight enough, so I threw it over and then I tried to run, but he sat on my back. And then I just started kicking him. I kicked him and I bruised him really bad. As Castro overpowered her, Gina screamed for help. But the radio in his basement and the radio in the living room were too loud for anybody to hear. Gina said the first time Castro indecently assaulted her was on May 7, 2004. Though she remembers the exact date, she was not comfortable discussing the details of what happened. First was Castro's new favorite. He seemed to treat her better than the other girls. She also had the nicer room. Amanda said the slight gestures of favoritism made the girls feel jealous. It was just simple things, but when you do not have anything, you are like, well, why do I not have that? I want that. At first, Castro took special care to keep the girls divided and did not permit them to talk. He was always there watching their every move. It was like he knew everything that they did. One of the meals he made for them was hot dogs, rice, and eggs, all cooked in bacon grease, and all served together in a bowl. The girls were occasionally allowed out of their rooms to do chores, but had to obey stringent rules like only using a tiny drop of dish soap for the dishes and putting the pan in the center of the stove. The black and white television was their only window to the outside world. Amanda said she would watch the Montel Williams show featuring psychic Sylvia Brown, desperately wishing her mother would appear on the program so Sylvia could tell her mom that she was alive and okay. In 2004, Amanda's mother, Luana Miller, did go on the show. Sylvia told her, "I am sorry. She is not alive." Amanda said she broke down crying because she could not believe she said that. And then her mom broke down crying. Even though Amanda's mother was told she was no longer alive, she never stopped looking for Amanda. That was until 2006, when her mother passed away in March of heart failure, 3 years after Amanda disappeared. She never got the chance to see her daughter freed. On her 20th birthday, April 22, 2006, Amanda realized that she might be pregnant. This terrified her as she barely ate and she was chained to a wall and had to use a bucket for a bathroom. She gave birth later that year on Christmas. Michelle said that while Castro refused to let her give birth, he made her help Amanda deliver a daughter into an inflatable kiddie pool. The baby was not breathing at first and Castro threatened to end Amanda's life if the baby did not make it. So she performed CPR on the infant who revived and was named Jocelyn. Amanda had mixed emotions about the baby. She said, "This is his kid, how do I feel about that?" And she resembled him a lot and I would look at her and I just felt like, she is mine. She is mine. Gina said that having the little girl there with them was a welcome distraction. She said, "It was fun because I can get away from the situation. When I was playing with Jocelyn made me forget everything." Jocelyn saw the chains on her mother, which Amanda said Castro instructed her to call bracelets. When Jocelyn was about 2, almost 3 years old, Castro took the chains off of her. As Jocelyn grew older, Castro allowed her freedoms that Amanda, Gina, and Michelle were not given. Though she was locked in with the 3 of them whenever Castro left the house, Jocelyn occasionally was allowed to go outside in the backyard, to the park, or to Sunday services with her father. Castro's love for Jocelyn seemed to turn him into a different man with her. Amanda said, she loved him and he loved her. She was always nervous and worried if he would touch her or think about touching her because of his problems. On May 6, 2013, the women finally had a chance to escape. Jocelyn went downstairs and came running back up saying, "I do not find Daddy. Daddy's nowhere around." Amanda said her heart started pounding as she thought this was her chance to escape. If she was going to take that chance, it had to be now. For the first time in 10 years, Amanda said she found her bedroom door unlocked without Castro around. Downstairs, the front door was open but wired with an alarm. Beyond it, the storm door was padlocked shut, but Amanda was still able to squeeze out an arm. Gina said she thought Amanda had been caught by Castro and talked Michelle out of running to Amanda. Amanda said someone passing by outside saw her but did not intervene. That is when neighbor Charles Ramsey showed up. He tried pulling the door open but it was stuck. So he started kicking the door open and said, "There you go, finish kicking it out and you can get out." Once Amanda was out, she called for Jocelyn to crawl through the door. The 2 of them found a neighbor with a phone to call 911. Shortly after, the police arrived and rescued the other 2 women. Amanda said, "I was terrified, and just because there are people on the street does not mean that he would not hurt me. I was so terrified. I still do not know why he left that day with the door unlocked. I will never know. Gina remembered it took her a while to come out of her room because she did not believe the police were really there. I thought maybe they were people in costumes because I was shocked. When Gina told the first responders her name, they looked like they had seen a ghost or something. Their faces completely dropped. The women finally made their escape after more than 9 years in captivity. Castro was arrested hours later. He was charged with 4 counts of kidnapping and 3 counts of indecent assault. Additional charges were reported to be pending, including for the intentional induction of miscarriages, assault, a charge for each instance of indecent assault, and a kidnapping charge for each day each captive was held. The women were taken to the hospital where Michelle was found to be in the worst condition of the 3. They ran a bunch of tests on her to try and figure out what was causing her to bleed and why she was having stomach issues. They eventually told her she only has a few days left to live. Still, she refused to be defeated. Michelle remembered singing and dancing while receiving treatment. She was trying to make the best of her few days left. They put her on 14 different medications before she was actually better. Soon all of them were released from the hospital. During Castro's interrogations, he recalled each of the abductions in great detail and indicated that they were unplanned crimes of opportunity. He did not have an exit plan and believed that he would eventually be caught one day. Castro told the police that he treated the girls well and described the countless assaults he committed as consensual. He confirmed terminating Michelle's pregnancies, but claimed it was a mutual decision. He referred to himself as cold-blooded and an addict. The police found a note in the house in which he discussed the abductions and wrote that his money and possessions should be given to the kidnapped women if he were caught. Castro made his first court appearance at the Cleveland Municipal Court on May 9, where bail was set at $8 million. The prosecutors intended to seek the end-of-life penalty against Castro. On August 1, 2013, Castro was sentenced to life plus 1,000 years in prison after he pleaded guilty to 937 counts of kidnapping and assault. At his sentencing, Castro addressed the court for nearly 20 minutes, in which he claimed to be a good person. He claimed that he had never beaten or tortured the women and insisted that most of the intercourse he had with them was consensual. Castro blamed the FBI for failing to catch him, and he blamed his 3 victims for getting into a car with a stranger. He also said that he learned they were not virgins when he had intercourse with them for the first time. Castro said, "I hope they can find it in their hearts to forgive me because we had a lot of harmony going on in that home." Michelle also spoke at the sentencing. Addressing Castro, she said, "You took 11 years of my life away. I spent 11 years in hell. Now your hell is just beginning. I will overcome all that has happened, but you will face hell for eternity. I will live on. You will lose a part of your life a little every day as you think of the 11 years of atrocities that you inflicted on us. I can forgive you, but I will never forget." Castro was born in Puerto Rico. He had 9 siblings. His parents got divorced when he was a child, and he moved to the U.S. with his mother and 3 of his siblings. They lived in Pennsylvania before they moved to Cleveland, Ohio, where his father and other relatives lived. Castro had a hard childhood. He was indecently and physically abused. While they lived in Puerto Rico, when Castro was 5, he was molested by one of their neighbors. He was also indecently assaulted by an uncle. His mother was also physically and verbally abusive towards him. When he was in junior high in Cleveland, he got suspended for touching a girl's breasts. When he was an adult, he met his girlfriend Grimilda Figueroa when they moved to the same neighborhood where she lived with her family. Castro and Grimilda moved to their own house at 2207 Seymour Avenue in Cleveland's Tremont neighborhood in 1992. This was the same house where he held the 3 women captives. Castro was abusive towards Grimilda. According to Grimilda's sister, Castro beat her, breaking her nose, ribs, and arms, which caused a blood clot on her brain that resulted in an inoperable tumor. He also threw her down a flight of stairs that fractured her skull. In 1993, Castro was arrested for domestic violence, but he was not indicted by a grand jury. 3 years later, Grimilda moved out with the help of the police, and she took their 4 children with her. Castro was not happy about this, and the police had to detain him, but they did not press any charges. Even after Grimilda left him, he still continued to threaten and attack her. In 2012, Grimilda passed away due to complications from her brain tumor. Castro worked as a school bus driver until he was fired in 2012 for making bad judgments. These bad judgments included making illegal U-turns with toddlers and infants on his bus, using the bus to go grocery shopping, leaving a child on the bus while he went on his lunch break, and leaving the bus unattended while he took a nap at home. At the time of his arrest, Castro's home was in foreclosure after 3 years of not paying his real estate taxes. Castro's home at 2207 Seymour Avenue was demolished on August 7, 2013, as part of his plea bargain. About a month into his sentence, on September 3, the 53-year-old was found lifeless in his prison cell hanging from a bedsheet. He took his own life. Castro left a note with Bible passages that he wrote. It read, "If you confess, you will be saved, and God loves you, for all are sinners," as well as a note with the text, "Love my kids and grandkids." Since their escape, the 3 women have been dealing with everything that happened to them. Michelle, who changed her name to Lily Rose Lee, released 2 memoirs, Finding Me and Life After Darkness. She found the love of her life, Miguel Rodriguez, a medical courier, and they got married in May 2016. She has since traveled the globe as a public speaker and launched her foundation Lily's Ray of Hope, supporting women and girls who are victims of domestic violence, human trafficking, and child abuse. She partnered with specialty coffee maker 319 Company to showcase her artwork and raise money for her foundation, which provides resources for women to restart their lives. She has also been involved with rescue animals. She and Miguel will never be able to have children of their own due to the abuse Castro inflicted on her, but they are looking into adopting. Amanda has turned her attention to spotlighting missing people in Northeast Ohio. She started hosting a daily news segment on Cleveland's Fox 8 because she wanted missing people to know the public was still looking for them. In December 1983, in a flat in Windmill Court, Shuddup Hill, London, the lifeless body of a 50-year-old man was found. The perpetrator would wait nearly 4 decades before walking into a police station to confess. Christopher Ainscough was born in Dublin sometime around 1933. A proud Irishman and openly gay, he eventually moved to London, where he built a quiet and respectable life for himself working as a waiter. In December 1983, he failed to show up for his job in the city. Concerned by his unexplained absence, his colleagues contacted the authorities. The police officers were dispatched to his flat at Windmill Court on Shuddup Hill to conduct a welfare check. When the officers entered the apartment, they were met with a horrifying scene. Christopher was found deceased inside his home. He had suffered devastating injuries to the head, and it was immediately clear that his demise had not been accidental. The investigators found a marble ashtray at the scene, weighing approximately 2.4 kilograms. It had been used to strike Christopher with such force that it caused a fractured skull, leaving no doubt that he had been deliberately and violently attacked. The detectives struggled to identify a suspect. No one had seen or heard anything suspicious, and no immediate lead surfaced. With limited forensic tools at the time and a lack of witnesses or concrete evidence, the original investigation reached a standstill. After nearly 2 years of effort with no breakthrough, the case was officially closed in 1985. For more than 35 years, the case remained unsolved until 2020, when it took a sudden and unexpected turn. After years of silence, 58-year-old Anthony Kemp, a homeless man, walked into Chiswick Police Station in West London and confessed to ending the life of Christopher Ainscough. It was the early hours of the morning, just after 4 a.m., when Kemp began throwing stones at the station's window to get the attention of officers. When one of them came outside, Kemp made a startling admission. He told the officer that he had taken a life 40 years earlier. Kemp stated that he had bashed his brains in following an argument and expressed no remorse for what he had done. He openly declared, "I am not going to live on the streets, that is a fact. I would rather the government look after me. I would rather do the last few years of my life and bang up than sleep on the streets." He ended by saying, "For 40 years I got away with it and now I am owning up to it." His confession stunned the officers. During questioning, Kemp admitted to attacking Christopher with a marble ashtray, the same object found at the scene in 1983. He revealed that after delivering the fatal blows, he wiped down the crime scene to remove any trace of evidence. At the time of the crime, Kemp had been just 21 years old. Despite the years that had passed, his confession provided critical new details that aligned with the original findings from the scene. The police were able to support Kemp's confession with physical evidence. A cigarette but recovered from Christopher's flat during the original investigation was retested, and the DNA analysis confirmed Kemp's presence at the scene. With both a confession and forensic proof, Kemp was charged. He appeared in court and pleaded guilty to the charge. In October 2021, the judge sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 15.5 years. Following Kemp's arrest and conviction, Detective Chief Inspector Simon Harding from the Specialist Crime Command renewed efforts to identify Christopher's next of kin. Despite their attempts during the initial investigation in the 1980s, the police had never been able to locate any of his family members. With the case finally resolved after decades, the authorities hoped to inform any surviving relatives and bring some measure of closure to those who had once known the man whose life was so violently cut short. In April 1991, in Nags Head, North Carolina, human remains were found inside a trash can rack. What followed was a painful unraveling of secrets, a long-awaited arrest, and a courtroom reckoning that would bring a small measure of justice to a life lost too soon. On April 4, 1991, a disturbing discovery in the coastal town of Nags Head, North Carolina, prompted an urgent police response. The officers were dispatched to the 8,600 block of East Tides Drive after someone reported what appeared to be human remains found in a trash can rack. Upon arrival, the authorities discovered the decomposed body of an infant. Due to the severe state of decomposition, the investigators were initially unable to determine the gender of the child. In the days that followed, an autopsy was performed at the North Carolina Medical Examiner's Office in Greenville. Forensic pathologist Dr. Mary Gilliland led the examination and made several harrowing discoveries. According to Dr. Gilliland, the infant's cause of demise was asphyxia caused by airway obstruction, specifically from a plastic hair curler. In addition to the asphyxiation, the child also suffered blunt force trauma to the face. The lower portion of the infant's torso was missing. While this damage was likely the result of animal activity after the body had been discarded, the condition of the remains made it difficult to assess other injuries. Despite the decomposition, it was determined that the infant appeared to be full-term and showed signs of being alive when the curler was inserted. At the time, the authorities had no way of identifying the infant, and no leads pointing to the child's parents or anyone who might have been involved. With no witnesses, no DNA identification technology readily available, and no one coming forward, the case went cold. The almost 3 decades-long mystery of the unidentified infant took a turn in 2019 when the investigators decided to reopen the case. Hoping that new advances in forensic technology could provide the answers they had long sought, the detectives sent one of the child's rib bones to Othram. The lab was eventually able to extract DNA from the sample and trace it through genealogical records to identify possible relatives of the infant. This breakthrough led investigators to 54-year-old Scott Gordon Poole and 51-year-old Robin Lynn Byram, who had been in an on-and-off relationship around the time of the child's birth. With assistance from the Alexander County Sheriff's Office and the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, the Nags Head Police Department conducted a multi-agency operation to collect DNA samples from Poole and Byram. Testing confirmed that the pair were the biological parents of the deceased infant. In October 2021, both were arrested and charged in Dare County with 1 count each of concealing the birth of a child, a felony offense. Byram and Poole were released shortly afterward on $250,000 secured bonds as the legal process began to unfold. During interviews with the investigators, Byram initially denied ever being pregnant, claiming she suffered from endometriosis and Graves' disease. However, when confronted with the DNA evidence, she reportedly broke down in tears and admitted that she had not known she was pregnant until she went into labor in the bathroom. Byram claimed that the baby was still born and that she used the hair curler in a desperate attempt to get it to breathe. According to her account, She gave birth alone in her car, attempted to revive the baby, and then kept the infant with her inside the house for several days. When the body began to smell, she said she took it to the beach. In another account, Byram told the investigators that after leaving the beach, she went to the ocean intending to take her own life, but ultimately did not follow through. Instead, she drove around for a while before placing the infant's body in the trash, where it was eventually discovered. At the time of the incident, Byram was living with her parents on Tarkle Ridge Drive in Kitty Hawk. She claimed that she never informed anyone, including her parents or Poole, about the pregnancy or the birth. Poole, for his part, told the investigators that he had no knowledge of the pregnancy or the child's existence, a statement that Byram supported. The legal proceedings concluded in 2023 with significant developments. Poole was rearrested on February 17, 2023, after failing to appear in court and was held on a $1 million secured bond. In a plea deal in June 2023, Byram faced a maximum sentence of 20 years, with a presumptive term of 6 years. Senior resident Superior Court Judge Jerry Tillett sentenced her to serve up to 6 years, taking into account credit for time already served and good behavior. On the same day, Poole appeared in court and pleaded guilty to the failure to appear charge. As part of his agreement with the district attorney, the charge connected to the child's birth was dismissed. He was sentenced to 24 months of unsupervised probation and ordered to pay court and attorney fees. In December 1977, a group of hunters stumbled upon skeletal remains in Mississippi. The woman remained unidentified for decades. On December 27, 1977, a group of hunters made a grim discovery at a construction site near Interstate 10 and Highway 63 in Mississippi. They stumbled upon skeletal remains belonging to a woman. Although no exact cause of demise could be determined, the medical examiners believed that her life was ended. It was estimated that she had been deceased for approximately 3 to 4 months before her body was found. The unidentified woman was described as a small in stature African American, notable for a front gold tooth that stood out in her smile. The investigators also believed she may have been wearing a wig. These physical details were among the few clues available to authorities. With no identity and no immediate leads, she became known as Eshatapa Jane Doe, a name that would remain attached to her case for more than 4 decades. Efforts to identify her continued over the years, with several facial reconstructions and computer-generated composites created to aid recognition. In 2012, Pascagoula Police investigator Darren Versiga entered her case into the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System in hopes of reaching a broader audience. Despite these efforts, early attempts at identification through DNA analysis yielded no successful matches. A breakthrough came in 2018 when convicted serial offender Samuel Little confessed to a series of crimes across the southeastern United States. Among them was the case of a woman he did not know by name, but whose description matched Eshatapa Jane Doe. The investigators confirmed that Little had been in Jackson County in 1977 during the time frame in which she is believed to have lost her life. Although the cause of her demise remained uncertain, the authorities noted that Little often used strangulation in his crimes. Little eventually confessed to 93 cases, making him the most prolific serial offender in United States history, if all are verified. FBI analysts have supported the credibility of his confessions, including the one believed to involve Eshatapa Jane Doe. In December 2020, Samuel Little passed away in prison, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and unclaimed victims, including the woman found in Mississippi whose identity was still officially unknown. In January 2021, progress was made into identifying Eshatapa Jane Doe. The Mississippi State Crime Lab collaborated with Othram to conduct forensic genealogy using the victim's DNA. Dr. David Middleman of Othram soon contacted investigator Matt Hoggett with a promising lead, a possible distant relative of the victim residing in Texas. The connection had been identified through advanced DNA analysis. Investigator Hoggett reached out to the distant cousin, who then directed him to her 93-year-old paternal grandmother, originally from Lafleur County, Mississippi. When interviewed, the elderly woman revealed that her cousin Clara Birdlong, born around 1933, had vanished from Lafleur County sometime in the 1970s. Another distant cousin recalled that Clara was known by the nickname Nut 10 and described her as a petite woman who wore a wig and had a gold front tooth. She too confirmed that Clara disappeared without a trace in the 1970s. In August 2021, the investigation gained momentum when Hoggett located a woman in Lafleur County who had known Clara. She recalled that Clara left the area in the 1970s with an African-American man who claimed to be traveling through Mississippi on his way to Florida. After leaving with him, Clara was never seen or heard from again. This information aligned with the estimated time of demise of Escatapa Jane Doe and provided a critical link between the unidentified woman and Clara. The following month, in September, Hoggett requested DNA samples from several individuals closely connected to Clara. The samples were sent to Othram for comparison. Their analysis confirmed a match between the victim and the 93-year-old grandmother. After eliminating all other possible relatives, the investigators formally concluded that the woman known for over 40 years as Escatapa Jane Doe was Clara Birdlong, born in 1933 in Lafleur County, Mississippi. As the investigation continued, it was discovered that Little had been arrested in Pascagoula in August 1977 for petit theft, placing him in the area during the approximate time of Clara's disappearance. Although he is deceased, Little is considered the prime suspect in Clara's demise. While the exact cause of her demise remains undetermined, the identification of Clara brought long-awaited answers to a mystery that had spanned more than 4 decades. In October 2014, concern turned to alarm when a paraplegic man living in East Liverpool, Ohio, vanished without a trace. Volunteer dive teams would bring a breakthrough to this cold case. Charles Fluharty, also known by many as Chuck, was born on May 23, 1957, in East Liverpool, Ohio. He was the son of Charles and Billy Fluharty, and he spent his life rooted in the town where he was born. At the age of 57, Charles was living with significant physical limitations, being a paraplegic and paralyzed from the waist down. In addition to his paralysis, his right leg had been amputated below the knee, and he bore a small, handmade tattoo on his left arm. Personal markings that hinted at the life he had lived. He found solace near the Ohio River. This riverside location became a personal sanctuary for him, a quiet place where he would go to reflect on life. He was the brother of 3 sisters, Marge Sackmar, Donna Stemple, and Trudy Cowie, as well as a brother, Jeff Fluharty. His daily life was supported by professional care. Charles received regular assistance from a home health aide. This setup allowed him to continue living outside of institutional care. On October 19, 2014, concern for Charles's safety escalated when his sister, Donna Stemple, reported him missing. The alarm had been raised after Charles made disturbing comments to his home health aide, which suggested he may have been in emotional distress or possibly in danger. Following the report, police visited his residence at Riverview Towers, a housing complex where Charles lived. Upon arrival, they discovered not only that Charles was gone, but his black Chevrolet Beretta was also missing. The vehicle's license plate number, 755XEL, was documented in the initial missing person report. The disappearance of a wheelchair-bound man, especially one dependent on others for mobility, raised immediate red flags. The authorities launched a search effort, but despite time and resources, there were no significant leads. Weeks turned into months and months into years. The case gradually grew cold. Then, in early October 2021, 7 years later, a startling discovery was made. On October 6th, a search effort in the Ohio River yielded a critical breakthrough. Divers were sent to examine a submerged object located at the mouth of Yellow Creek. The team battled through a thick layer of invasive zebra mussels that had encrusted the vehicle over time, but they successfully managed to retrieve the license plate from the sunken car. Sonar technology had detected the vehicle fairly quickly, prompting divers to inspect what appeared to be a long-submerged automobile. It did not take long to confirm that the car matched the description of the black Chevrolet Beretta that had belonged to Charles Fluharty. The license plate number 755XEL served as the definitive link, tying the vehicle in the river to the man who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances years earlier. The vehicle's location, submerged at the mouth of Yellow Creek in the Ohio River, suggested it had been there since shortly after Charles went missing. The Chaos Divers, a group known for their underwater recovery missions, joined their adventures with Purpose AWP colleagues on a live stream to share details of the recovery with their online audience. They described the operation in detail, noting the physical and environmental challenges they encountered during the process. One of the main difficulties was the thick silt in the riverbed, which significantly delayed the removal of the vehicle. According to the divers, it took approximately 5 to 6 hours for first-class towing to fully extract the Chevrolet Beretta from the water. Once the vehicle was successfully pulled from the river, Saline Township EMS stepped in to handle the next phase of the recovery. They removed human remains found in the vehicle and transported them to the Jefferson County morgue for examination and identification. The authorities expressed confidence that the remains belonged to Charles, and then it was finally confirmed. For the Fluharty family, the discovery is both an emotional blow and a necessary development. It brings an end to the agonizing uncertainty that had stretched on for years and could solve and close the missing persons case. No foul play is suspected. In December 2007, a 6-year-old girl disappeared from her home in Claremont, Florida. Years later, a message received online would lead to a breakthrough. Jacqueline Hernandez was born in 2001 and raised in the city of Claremont. She was the daughter of Angelica Vences Salgado and Pablo Hernandez. Her childhood was shaped by the separation of her parents. After their split, legal custody of Jacqueline was granted to her mother, Angelica. Despite the separation, Jacqueline maintained contact with her father. Pablo continued to be a part of her life through visits, and there was no indication of any serious conflict between the parents at that time. Their arrangement appeared to function with some degree of normalcy, allowing Jacqueline to have a relationship with both her mother and father. On December 22, 2007, a devastating event unfolded when 6-year-old Jacqueline was reported kidnapped from her home. That day marked the beginning of a long and painful ordeal for her family. Her mother returned home to find her daughter missing without a trace. Alarmed and overwhelmed with fear, she immediately contacted the local law enforcement to report Jacqueline as missing. The authorities launched an investigation right away, working to piece together Jacqueline's last known movements and identify who had been in contact with her before her disappearance. The focus quickly turned to Jacqueline's father, Pablo. Though he had been allowed visits, he did not have legal custody of Jacqueline. The investigators determined that he had been the last person to see her before she vanished. It was soon alleged that Pablo had taken Jacqueline from the home either during a visit or through deceit, removing her without Angelica's knowledge or consent. His actions were considered a violation of the custody arrangement and a serious criminal offense. The authorities concluded that Pablo had likely fled the country with Jacqueline, heading to Mexico shortly after the abduction took place. On the same day of the kidnapping, a felony warrant for Pablo was issued, charging him with kidnapping. Despite the urgency of the situation, efforts to locate him and Jacqueline faced significant challenges. The fact that he had possibly crossed international borders complicated the investigation, limiting the immediate reach of U.S. law enforcement. As weeks turned into months and eventually years, no confirmed sightings or reliable leads emerged. Although the case remained officially open, it gradually became classified as cold, with few updates and no resolution in sight. 14 years after Jacqueline was reported as missing, on September 2, 2021, a breakthrough came. Jacqueline's mother reached out to the Claremont Police Department with an unexpected claim. She had been contacted online by a woman who was convinced she was Jacqueline. This revelation sparked a renewed sense of urgency as the authorities scrambled to confirm whether the woman was indeed Jacqueline. In response to this potentially life-altering lead, a coordinated effort was set into motion involving multiple law enforcement agencies, including the Florida and Texas police departments, as well as investigators from the Department of Homeland Security. A plan was developed to intercept the woman and verify her identity during a meeting with Angelica. The two agreed to meet in person at a point of entry to the United States in Laredo, Texas on September 10th to discuss the matter further and confirm the woman's identity. On the day of the planned meeting, the authorities were ready. Homeland Security Investigations, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and the Laredo Police Department were all on standby to ensure the safety of both parties while verifying the woman's claims. At around 2 p.m. that afternoon, law enforcement intercepted both Angelica and the woman who had reached out to her right at the U.S.-Mexico border. Through careful checks and documentation, the authorities were able to confirm that the woman was indeed Jacqueline Hernandez. After over a decade of uncertainty, Angelica finally learned the truth about her daughter's fate. The years of searching, the unanswered questions, and the emotional toll of not knowing whether Jacqueline was alive or deceased came to an end. The emotional moment was a bittersweet one. While it was a relief to confirm Jacqueline's identity, it raised a new set of questions. Jacqueline had been living in Mexico for years, under circumstances that had yet to be fully understood. What Jacqueline experienced during her years in Mexico remains largely unknown. The details of her upbringing, living conditions, and the identity of the people around her during those years have not yet been made public. Meanwhile, Pablo, the man believed to have taken Jacqueline from her home in 2007, remains at large. The authorities have confirmed that there is still an active warrant for his arrest, and efforts to locate him continue. His current whereabouts are unknown, and he has not made any public statements or contact since the day of the abduction, but the missing persons case was finally solved. January 2003 to August 2004, 3 young women were preyed upon by a malicious monster out to inflict as much harm as possible. Each of these women had been out in public minding their own business when a man decided he would try to take their lives in a horrific manner, from trauma to the head to using his vehicle as his weapon of choice. Towards the end of 2004, the man was captured and taken into custody. He was found guilty of the charges a few years later, but in a shocking twist, he was linked to another unsolved slaying that had happened 8 years earlier. Amanda Jane Dowler, or Millie as she was known, was born on June 25, 1988, to parents Bob and Sally Dowler. Millie had an older sister, Gemma, who she adored. The girls got on extremely well and were practically best friends. Gemma described her sister as friendly and vivacious with a sparkle in her eye. She had many close friends and was a kind, generous young girl who loved to cheer others up when they were having a bad day. Millie was a bright light in the lives of those around her, making her sudden disappearance all the harder to bear. It was March 21, 2002. 13-year-old Millie left Heathside School at 3:07 p.m. and walked to the Weybridge railway station with a friend. Both girls got on a train and rode to the Walton-on-Thames station. This was one stop before where Millie usually got off, at Hersham. The girls had decided to grab a bite to eat at the station cafe. Millie made a call to her father at 3:47 p.m., telling him she would be home in the next 30 minutes. The girls parted ways at 4:05 p.m., and Millie set off home. The last time she was seen was waiting at a bus stop on Station Avenue, where a friend of Gemma recognized her. CCTV cameras further along the route showed no sign of Millie. Millie didn't arrive home as planned, and worry started to set in. By 7 p.m., her parents called the police and reported her as missing. A large-scale search operation followed by numerous different officers on foot looking for Millie. Police helicopters were also deployed, hoping to catch a glimpse of the young girl or find something that showed signs of her being in a particular area. Local rivers were searched, and the route Millie should have taken was gone over with a fine-tooth comb. When the CCTV cameras along Station Avenue were accessed, a red Daiwa Nexia was pictured at 4:32 p.m. 7 years later. We would find out who was behind the wheel. Detectives working on the case made multiple public appeals for any witnesses who may have seen anything suspicious or seen Millie herself that day. Her disappearance was so sudden that initial theories revolved around Millie either purposely running away or knowing the person who took her. How could a complete stranger have grabbed her at this time of day in a fairly public setting? It didn't make any sense. Millie's family was adamant that she wouldn't have run away. Crime Watch UK aired a reconstruction of Millie's last known movements and featured a direct appeal to the young girl, as Millie having run away was the definite best-case scenario. But her mother couldn't fathom why her youngest daughter would do such a thing. Years later, it was publicly revealed that Millie had written letters saying she was going to leave home and expressing some unhappiness. In reality, these letters were nothing more than a teenage girl writing her completely normal frustrations out on paper after what was likely a typical argument with her parents or sister. Nothing more. On March 28th, the police still didn't believe they were dealing with a stranger taking Millie by force. No witnesses had come forward having witnessed any sort of struggle, despite Millie having been seen on multiple occasions throughout the afternoon. They felt it was unlikely she had gone anywhere with a stranger, hence believing she was familiar with the person she left with. For weeks went by with few leads and still no sign of Millie. On April 23, 2002, a body was found in the River Thames, and immediately speculation ran wild that this could be Millie Dowler. It was later confirmed that the remains were that of 73-year-old Macy Thomas. She had disappeared the year prior and her passing was ruled as non-suspicious. Macy likely drowned. Weeks turned into months with still no new information about what had happened to Millie. Frustrations continued to grow for the Dowlers, not understanding how their daughter could just disappear into thin air. As if things couldn't get any worse, the family themselves started facing scrutiny, with Bob Dowler being the main target. Since the police had stated on many occasions that Millie likely knew whoever she had left with, naturally the media latched on to that person being a family member. While trying to come to terms with their loss, they also had to contend with stories being published and unfounded rumors spreading. Bob Dowler had nothing to do with his daughter's disappearance, which made the focus on him hard to bear. Not only was it a horrific thing to be accused of, but Bob knew that all the time spent looking at him was time wasted on finding the person who was really responsible. Authorities later apologized for the possibility of missing crucial leads while looking at Bob for Millie's disappearance. By June, the authorities spoke to the Dowlers and told them they needed to brace themselves for the worst-case scenario. Bob and Sally continued to send their daughter text messages, hoping she was still out there somewhere. That month, a £100,000 reward was offered by the Sun. But still, no one came forward with any useful information. In September 2002, everyone's worst fears were realized. It was September 18th, and a small group of mushroom pickers were out in Yateley Heath Woods in Yateley, Hampshire, when one of them spotted something in the undergrowth. It was a body. The authorities were immediately identified, and dental records confirmed that they had found Millie Dowler. She was found unclothed, with none of the items she had in her possession when she disappeared. That included her backpack, purse, and cell phone. To this day, none of the items have ever been recovered. The case was no longer a missing person investigation. Authorities were now looking for the person responsible for taking Millie's life. The Surrey police launched the investigation, titled Operation Ruby, to bring this monster to justice. A month after Millie was found, the Surrey police set up a large-scale roadblock near Yateley Heath Woods. Roughly 6,000 motorists were stopped and questioned, but this produced no new leads. Items from Millie's bedroom were taken in for forensic testing, and on March 23, 2003, a year after she was last seen alive, unknown male DNA was found on one of her items of clothing. This led authorities to theorize that Millie had potentially met with the man who took her life before she vanished. Unfortunately, this lead was shortly ruled out. Despite hundreds of people being interviewed, extensive house-to-house inquiries, and a thorough look into some unsavory characters that lived near where Millie was last seen and near where her body had been found, the Surrey police still had nothing. The next possible lead came when the Dowlers received a chilling letter from someone claiming to be responsible for what happened to Millie. It didn't take long to work out the letter was written by Paul Hughes, who was in jail at the time for indecent acts to a young girl. He was given an additional 5 years behind bars for the letter and the threats he made to Millie's sister, Gemma. The prison service made an apology to the Dowlers for not having intercepted the letter before it was sent to them. Other sick individuals also viewed Millie's disappearance and passing as some sort of game. Leanne Newman made multiple phone calls claiming to be Millie before her blog was found. She called Bob and Sally, the police, and even Millie's school. Newman was given a 5-month prison sentence after pleading guilty to making these phone calls. Gary Farr, a mentally ill man, repeatedly emailed those close to Millie and the investigators, claiming she had been smuggled into Poland, claimed her body was nothing more than a cover-up. He was eventually sanctioned under the Mental Health Act for indefinite holding due to being a danger to the public. Behind all of this nonsense, there was still a family desperate to know what happened to their Millie, but the truth was years away. On February 4, 2003, 19-year-old Marcia McDonald was hit over the head with a blunt object, not far from her Hampton home. The incident happened not long after Marcia had gotten off the 111 bus at the Percy Road bus stop. Tragically, Marcia lost her life 2 days later in hospital. On May 28th of the following year, 18-year-old Kate Sheedy was walking home when she noticed a suspicious car parked on the roadside. A man was inside, and the engine was running, but the lights were deliberately turned off. Kate decided to move away from the vehicle and cross the road. Before she even knew what happened, Kate was run over by the car. Proving this wasn't an accident, the man then reversed over Kate's body before racing off. Miraculously, Kate was able to drag herself off the road and find help. Despite the severity of her condition, Kate survived after a lengthy hospital stay. 3 months later, another young woman was preyed upon. Amélie Delagange was a 20-year-old French student visiting England. Shockingly, Amélie's life was taken in a brutal manner similar to that of Marcia McDonald. It took authorities less than 24 hours to link the cases. On November 22, 2004, a man was arrested for what had happened to Amélie Delagange. His name was Levi Belfield. Levi Rabbits was born on May 17, 1968, in Isleworth, London, to parents Jean and Joseph Rabbits. It is unclear exactly when he changed his surname to Belfield from Rabbits, but we do know that was his mother's maiden name. When he was still a child, Belfield's father passed away after battling with leukemia. He grew up with his 4 siblings on a council estate in southwest London and attended Crane Junior High School. When Belfield was in his early teens, he was convicted of breaking into a house and stealing various items. That was in 1981. In 1990, Belfield got into a physical altercation with a police officer, which resulted in a second charge. His criminal history is littered with multiple offenses and convictions, but none of them were as serious as what he would later be accused of. Belfield has 11 children with 5 women. His ex-girlfriends later described Belfield's behavior as charming initially before his true colors started to show. All of the women shared the same stories of what Belfield was like as a partner. This is what Detective Chief Inspector Colin Sutton, who worked on the later cases involving Belfield, had to say of the man. When we started dealing with him, he came across as very jokey, like he's your best mate. But he's a cunning individual, violent. He can switch from being nice to being nasty instantly. In 2003 and 2004, Levi Belfield operated a wheel clamping business. This gave him an intimate knowledge of the streets he stalked. Like a wild animal looking for its next meal, Levi would prowl the streets looking for a suitable victim. Detective Sutton commented on this mentality of Belfield, saying, "Belfield has a massive ego to feed. He thinks he's God's gift to everyone. He drives around in his car, feels a bit whatever, and sees some young blonde girl. The young blonde girl says, 'Go away,' and he thinks, 'You dare to turn down Levi Belfield? You're worth nothing.' And then she gets a whack over the head. It is shown in the case of Kate Sheedy. She was smart enough to think she didn't like the look of his car and crossed the road. He thinks, 'You think you're so clever,' and whoosh, he runs her over. After CCTV linked him to Amélie's case, Belfield was surveilled by undercover officers who witnessed him talking to young girls at bus stops. It was quite clear that had he not been taken into custody, more women would have lost their lives. On February 25, 2008, Levi Belfield was found guilty of taking Marcia McDonald's and Amélie Delagange's lives. He was also convicted of his actions towards Kate Sheedy. On February 26th, Belfield found he would be spending the rest of his life behind bars. His defense passed the news on to Belfield as he refused to be in court that day. Levi Belfield was also considered in 2 other cases, falsely imprisoning 17-year-old Anna Maria Rennie back in October 2001 and attempting to take the life of Irma Dragoshi in December 2003. Both women identified Belfield as the person responsible, but juries failed to reach a unanimous verdict in both cases. Following his convictions, 39-year-old Belfield was publicly named as a chief suspect in Millie's case. This was mainly due to CCTV footage that tied him to the Red Daewoo Nexia scene around the time Millie was last seen on the same road that she had been on. Further investigation showed that Belfield's then-girlfriend owned the car, and she lived in the same area as the Dowlers. In an interview Belfield did with the Daily Mirror in 2009, he said, "There's not many Red Daewoos floating about in Walton-on-Thames, so we've got to be realistic about it. But then I've got to be careful about how I answer these questions. I did use the Daewoo once, and I was stopped by the police once in it for speeding." It is unclear why Belfield thought this was the right thing to say when being considered for something so heinous. Like Millie's items, the car was never found. In March 2010, investigators felt certain they had their man, and Levi Belfield was charged with snatching Millie from the road and taking her life. Belfield's trial began on May 10, 2011 in the Central Criminal Court, presided over by Mr. Justice Wilkie. It took place over 6 weeks before a verdict was reached. In his opening statement, the prosecuting barrister recounted what happened to Millie on her final day. On this day, an entirely innocent and quite ordinary diversion to a station cafe to buy some chips with some school friends was a decision that was to cost Millie her life, because it meant her taking a fateful journey along Station Avenue. Belfield was found guilty on June 23, 2011, and given a second life sentence. Years later, Belfield admitted to what he had done to Millie. The Dowlers finally had some sort of closure, but still a sour taste was left in the mouths by many aspects of the investigation. Sally spoke to journalists and explained, "Our family life has been scrutinized and laid open for everyone to inspect." Bob said that the price for this conviction had been far too costly for the family. Belfield's defense had viciously cross-examined Millie's parents as Gemma watched on. She later described what she witnessed as one of the worst days in her life. The defense attempted to paint Millie as a depressed teen, not the vivacious girl those around her knew. Millie's story was subsequently brought back into the spotlight on June 30, 2011, when Crime Watch aired a special title taken, The Millie Dowler Story. The program detailed the investigation, had witness interviews, and had Millie's family involved. Reconstruction was also featured, where they reenacted how that day unfolded. Millie's family was finally able to show the nation who Millie was as a person beyond the sensationalized headlines. After everything, one question still remained. Was Belfield responsible for more slayings? Patricia Joyce Morris was born on January 10, 1966, to parents George, a retired Army chief, and Marjorie Morris. She was one of 3 siblings, with a sister and 2 brothers. Patsy, as she was fondly known, was born in Birmingham, but moved to Isleworth, southwest London when she was 13 years old. On June 16, 1966, in 1980, Patsy disappeared during a lunch break at school. It has been theorized that the 14-year-old decided to walk home that day as she needed to change into dry clothes after she had been without a raincoat that morning. On her way there, Patsy vanished. 2 days later, a police dog found her body on Hounslow Heath. She had been left face down in a thicket just a quarter mile from her home. A ligature had been used to take her life. Levi Belfield was 12 years old at the time. After leaving Crane Junior School, he moved to Feltham Comprehensive, the same school that Patsy attended. In fact, Belfield had been her childhood boyfriend. A year after what happened to Patsy, Belfield was convicted of the first official crime of burglary. He wasn't at school on the day Patsy was last seen, and he knew the area where she was found very well. When Patsy's mother learned of where her daughter was discovered, it caused great confusion. She didn't understand why Patsy would have walked through there. "We can't understand what she was doing on the heath. She was always told not to go there and never disobeyed our orders," she told the press. Knowing now that Belfield used to hang out there, often skipping school to do so, it does make you wonder. But was Belfield born evil? Could a boy that age really be capable of committing something like that? Following the conclusion of Millie's case, the possibility was explored. When Patsy's father, George Morris, heard about Belfield's connection to his daughter, he recalled a time all those years ago when a teenage boy had called his house and given him a death threat. He believes that was Belfield. He's a local man, which is why it could be him. And it's terrifying to think that someone of 12 or 13 could have done it, George said. Patsy Morris wasn't the only unsolved slaying that Belfield was considered for. In 1990, 51-year-old housewife Judith Gold was found a stone's throw from her Hampstead home, having been viciously struck in the head with an unknown item. Similar incidents took place across London from 1990 to 2004. All of these cases could be linked to Belfield due to the nature of them. The weapons of choice were distinct, the same type of weapons he used on Marcia and Amelie. While they couldn't confirm without a shadow of a doubt that he was the person responsible, he could also not be ruled out in any of the many incidents except for one. On July 6, 1996, 45-year-old Lynn Russell and her young daughter Megan, the pair and Lynn's other daughter, 9-year-old Josie, were ambushed while walking home from a swimming gala. They were then tied up and struck repeatedly with a hammer. Lynn, Megan, and the family dog lost their lives that day. Miraculously, Josie survived. While she was able to make a full recovery, it is highly likely that she still lives with the mental scars of what happened that tragic day. Belfield allegedly confessed to the crime to his cellmate. Belfield denies ever making this confession. His ex-girlfriend, who helped get a conviction in Millie's trial, has always maintained that Belfield was with her that day. "My daughter was born in '96, and that was the day of my birthday. He, Belfield, never left my side all day and all night. So there's absolutely no way he could have gone from Twickenham, where I lived, or Windsor, where I kept my horses, to Kent. Do what they say he did and get back without me knowing he was there. I can hand to my heart, I hate to say it, but I can say hand to my heart, he didn't do it," she said. Michael Stone was convicted of the charges after a second trial, following a successful appeal from his first conviction. Michael Stone had been behind bars since 2001. He still maintains his innocence. There have been many other cases that Belfield was considered for, and some that he allegedly confessed to, but as of today, police have not been able to find any substantial evidence that ties Belfield to any of these cases. Maybe one day the police will track down who was responsible for taking these lives, and maybe that man may just be Levi Belfield. Levi Belfield remains behind bars at HMP Franklin in County Durham. He will never set foot in the outside world again. On June 29, 2017, Gemma released a book titled My Sister Millie. In the heartfelt piece, Gemma describes what it was like living through that wild time, dealing with the loss of her sister, the media circus, and the suspicions of her parents. Gemma explains how she found healing. As an excerpt from the blurb reads, "It is the story of two stolen childhoods, Millie's and Gamma's, and about the love that kept the family together as they struggled with terrible darkness and injustice." Marie Erickson was born on December 14, 1984, in St. Paul, Minnesota. She was the daughter of John and Linda Erickson and had two brothers, Peter and Joel. Heidi committed her life to Jesus Christ as a young girl and faithfully walked with him. She was described as a joyful child of God. She loved and was loved by her family and many wonderful friends. In 2005, Heidi met Nick Furcus at church, hit it off, and they got married soon after. Nick was born February 25, 1983, and is the son of Steve and Julie Furcus. Heidi found work at Securian, a financial services company, while Nick Furcus was the director of operations for a carpet cleaning business. Heidi and Nick Furcus were both close with their parents. In 2010, the couple had been dealing with financial difficulties and were about to be evicted from their home. They were in over $15,000 of credit card debt. Heidi knew none of this, however. Out of shame, Nick did not tell anyone about their financial situation. Early in the morning on April 25, 2010, at approximately 6:30, 25-year-old Heidi made a 911 call from her cell phone. She frantically said that someone's trying to break into their home. She could be heard breathing heavily and screaming. It was clear she was terrified. The call ended abruptly with a loud noise. Just 65 seconds later, another 911 call was made from their home, this time from her husband, 27-year-old Nick Furcus. "My wife is shot. Someone broke into our house," Nick screamed into the phone. "I've been shot." When officers arrived at the scene, they found Nick with a gunshot wound to his left thigh. He was beside Heidi on the floor, talking to the 911 operator. He was highly emotional and was taken to the hospital. Heidi had been fatally shot in the upper back. Her body was found in the kitchen. Investigators noticed that the Firkus house was clean and tidy, and the entryway table beside the front door was undisturbed. They could not find any signs of a struggle taking place or anyone that forced themselves into the house. Nick Firkus told Sergeant Jim Gray of the St. Paul Police Department that he awoke to a suspicious noise at his front door, grabbed his shotgun from the closet where he kept it for safety, and alerted his sleeping wife. Both of them were trying to run out the back door to the detached garage to escape. According to Nick, Heidi stopped next to the front door to grab her wallet, which was on the table next to the front door. The door opened and there was a guy around 6 feet, 1 inch or 6 feet 2 inches with a dark hooded sweatshirt with the hood drawn tight around his face. Nick Firkus said that the guy grabbed the barrel of the shotgun, they wrestled, and that his finger slipped onto the trigger and it went off. The gunshot hit Heidi and she fell onto the floor. Nick Firkus and the intruder struggled over the shotgun and the gun went off a second time, hitting Nick in the leg. He fell down and the intruder took off through the front door. He told police that they were about to lose their house because they were behind on their bills. He said that they had not told any of their friends or family about the foreclosure or their need to be out of their house, but that they were going to tell their parents and friends and were planning to move later that day. According to him, they had planned to pack up their house on Sunday and Monday morning, put some of their belongings in the garage to get later, and find someone to stay with. Photographs and a video taken inside the Firkus home after the incident showed that despite having to be out of the house the next day, absolutely no packing had been done. Also, Heidi was scheduled to work on Monday, April 26th. She did not request the day off. On Thursday, April 22, 2010, 3 days before her life was ended, Heidi exchanged text messages with a friend, making plans to get a pedicure in the afternoon on Sunday, April 25th. In this exchange, Heidi was given the option of doing the pedicure on Sunday or the following Wednesday, and Heidi chose Sunday. She also suggested that they all go to church together that Sunday morning. It was evident that Heidi knew nothing about the eviction or that they had to move to a new place. Heidi's funeral took place at the Calvary Church in Roseville, Minnesota, a week after she lost her life. Many messages sympathizing with her parents, Nick, and their families streamed in. She was remembered as a beautiful young woman, and the community was deeply saddened. On her tombstone, the words, "Joyful Child of God," are engraved. Extensive neighborhood canvassing and a canine search showed no sign of an intruder. He was never found. Investigators did note that Nick Firkus perpetuated several false accounts to them during interviews. He became a suspect in the case when the police found no signs of a forced break-in or any missing items. There were also no background noises that indicated there was an intruder or a struggle taking place. When investigators looked into the audio of the 2911 calls made, investigators also found only Nick Firkus's DNA on the gun, and several witnesses testified there were no signs of a break-in. Nick Firkus's attorneys claimed the intruder was wearing gloves and was in the home for only a couple of seconds, so he could not have left DNA evidence. Nick Firkus retained the services of a defense attorney, Joe Friedberg, who recommended he cease contact with the St. Paul Police Department. At the advice of his lawyer, Nick Firkus declined investigators' request to sit down with a police sketch artist to create a composite of the alleged intruder. I knew they had used that as a lever to try interrogating him more, so I said, "No, we won't do that, but we'll hire an artist and do it," Friedberg told ABC News. Nick Firkus and Joe Friedberg returned to the St. Paul's Police Department with their own sketch of the alleged intruder, who Nick Firkus said was a male in his late 30s and wearing a hoodie. The police released the sketch through the media to see if any tips would come in. A woman identified Michael Pye to police as a potential match. Investigators started researching him immediately, and they learned that he was engaged in a pattern of breaking into homes in St. Paul around 6 in the morning. However, Michael Pye was incarcerated on the day of Heidi's slaying. Authorities subsequently cleared him of having any involvement in this case. A few months after Heidi's demise, Nick Firkus met Rachel Watson. She believed he was the man of her dreams. Rachel is described as a loving, caring, and generous individual who is always ready to extend a helping hand. She is also known for her kind and amicable behavior, which helps her maintain positive relationships with everyone around her. Also born in Minnesota, Rachel got to know Nick Firkus on a personal level through her sister Sarah and her brother-in-law David Olson, who were both close friends of Heidi. In fact, Sarah considered herself one of Heidi's best friends, and she was the one to insist that Nick Firkus was a wonderful man who loved and took care of his first wife without fail. Neither Sarah nor David minded when Rachel fell in love with him before deciding to tie the knot. The two got married in August 2012 and moved into a house purchased for them by Nick Firkus's parents. They welcomed their first child just a few months later. Neighbors who were acquainted with the couple claimed they appeared utterly in love, and they even went on to become proud parents of 2 more wonderful children. Yet with time, Rachel began doubting her husband's involvement in Heidi's case. Her suspicion about her husband's involvement with what happened to Heidi were raised when she found a notice that they might lose their home to foreclosure due to unpaid property taxes. Nick and Rachel Firkus had an arrangement where they would pay the mortgage amount to Nick Firkus's parents and he would pay the property taxes directly to the county. She immediately thought of what she had heard about Heidi's demise. According to Rachel, "I didn't know that this was happening and I'm living with this person. I have children with this person and the last time he had problems with finances. A lot of things went wrong," she said in an interview. She decided to confront him about it. Because she feared for her life as well, she sent their children away and even decided to record the whole conversation before talking to Nick. Although Nick Firkus said nothing incriminating while talking to his spouse, it was apparent he was hiding something. In one recording, Rachel said, "The fact that you're lying was so easy for you to do in front of me over and over and over makes me think that I could end my wife's life." He responded. She replied, "Yes." This worry kept nagging Rachel until she could not take it anymore and divorced him in 2019. Rachel told ABC's 2020 that catching Nick Firkus in a substantially similar lie was what led her to see the 2010 event in an entirely new light. In 2019, Sergeant Nicole Sipes of the St. Paul Police Department took a new look at Heidi Firkus' case. "The case always bothered me because the circumstances did not seem to fit what happened," Sipes said. Once Sipes learned of Nick Firkus' recent divorce from his second wife, she reached out to Rachel, who shared her suspicions. "She could have also been a victim," Sipes said. In May 2021, Nick Firkus was arrested and for the first time officially charged with taking his first wife's life. The investigation showed Nick Firkus was served with foreclosure in June 2009, and their house was sold at a sheriff's auction in the same month, 10 months before Heidi was slayed. Eviction proceedings had been filed in February, and an eviction hearing was held on March 8, 2010, which Nick Firkus attended alone. The lockout date was originally set for April 9, 2010. Nick Firkus called the attorneys and stated his grandmother was in hospice and asked to move it to April 26. However, investigators found no evidence either of his grandmothers were in hospice or passed away in 2010. In a review of correspondence between the couple and financial documents found in the home, investigators were unable to find any proof that Heidi knew of the impending eviction. Nick Firkus's trial started in February 2022. Defense attorneys argued Heidi knew about the foreclosure and impending eviction. Prosecutors, on the other hand, said she did not know, and her husband was desperate. Nick Firkus, the complaint said, had done absolutely no packing and kept Heidi completely in the dark about the fact that they were about to be evicted on April 26, 2010, which was one day after the slaying. Investigators have reviewed the text messages and emails sent to and from Heidi and Nick Firkus' cell phones and email accounts. There is not a single message that references foreclosure or eviction proceedings, or gives any indication that they would need to move out of their house imminently. On the contrary, on March 11, 2010, Heidi sent an email to a friend saying, "Wish we weren't tied down to our house so we could move somewhere fun." The law firm handling the foreclosure and eviction has no documentation signed by Heidi, and their representatives never had any contact with Heidi. All their contacts were with Nick Firkus. Investigators have spoken with Heidi's family, friends, and co-workers, and not one person said that Heidi ever said anything about foreclosure, eviction, or needing a place to stay or store their belongings. In April 2010, Heidi emailed Nick Furcus multiple times regarding scheduling a meeting with a realtor who helped them buy their house and who was referred to as JS and also a friend from church. Nick Furcus responded by saying that he had been in contact with JS. On April 23, 2010, Heidi sent Nick Furcus an email, asking whether he had heard from JS. Nick Furcus responded, "JS said that he's ready to meet when we are. I told him Monday should be good." Police interviewed JS, who said that he had not spoken to Nick Furcus in over a year and that there was no meeting scheduled for any Monday. The FBI also combined their ballistics testing and a virtual model of Heidi and Nick Furcus's house to prove that the shots were most likely not accidental in the middle of the struggle, but deliberate. However, Nick Furcus's attorney countered that these findings did not necessarily disprove his version of the events. Finally, the prosecutor asked the big question. Did you have anything to do with the incident in which Heidi lost her life? No, Nick Furcus said. Absolutely not. Ramsey County prosecutors argued that Nick Furcus hid details of their financial troubles from his wife and took her life due to the shame of their impending eviction. It wasn't just going to be the loss of his house. It was going to be the realization that he had lied to his wife. And he had lied to his friends. He had lied to the community for many years. Ramsey County Assistant District Attorney Elizabeth Lohman said. He took Heidi's life and saved his reputation. Senior Assistant Hennepin County Attorney Rachel Cracker said at the trial, where she aided Ramsey County prosecutors in securing the conviction. The trial lasted 11 days. On February 10, 2023, after 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found Nick Furcus guilty of slaying Heidi. Robert Richmond, Nick Furcus's defense attorney, refuted these allegations, but nevertheless he was found guilty on all the charges against him. In April 2023, Furcus was sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. It took more than a decade for this case to be solved, and it could very well have still been unsolved if Furcus was not caught in a big lie by his second wife, Rachel. Nick Furcus's family declined a request from ABC News for an interview, but issued a statement in support of him. He was wrongly convicted and sits in jail for a crime he did not commit. This is not just the belief of heartbroken parents. A part of the statement reads, after 13 years, Heidi's family and friends found some sort of closure. They had this to say in a statement. Because of the lies we were told as early as the day after her life was ended, along with the pressures to believe them, it has been virtually impossible to find closure to our grief. As the shock begins after what happened to Heidi, the realization quickly set in that everything Nick Furcus was telling us betrayed who I knew my sister to be, Heidi's brother Peter Erickson said. The fact that he had the audacity to peddle a story that was so obviously inconsistent with Heidi's character was, and still is, very much insulting and offensive to me and everyone else who actually knew and loved her. I really miss my sister, he added. Heidi's mom, Linda Erickson, holding back tears, said, Nick Furcus's unthinkable actions robbed her daughter and loved ones of participating in that adventure of life with her. She looked forward to being a mother, she said of Heidi. At present, Rachel still resides in St. Paul, Minnesota, where she owns and operates her own cosmetics company, Be Lovely. On top of it, she is also a vocal advocate for victims of human trafficking. In fact, reports indicate that Be Lovely donates 10% of each sale to organizations that work for victims of trafficking and other social injustices. It honestly is great to witness Rachel's success. Nick Furcus is serving his life sentence without parole at the Minnesota Correctional Facility in St. Cloud, Minnesota.